Mr. President, here we are again. On Monday, September 30th, just 5 days from now at midnight, absent some agreement and cooperation between the parties in the chambers here in the Congress, the entire federal government will begin shutting down. Mr. President, here we are again. Another day, another fiscal crisis, another politically manufactured crisis. Another politically manufactured crisis that is threatening to tear at the economic fabric of our whole country. It would be hard to believe if it weren't totally, completely believable. I've been in the Senate now just under 3 years, but this is my third of these crises. I was actually up in the chair presiding that night back in 2011 when we narrowly averted a shutdown just minutes before funding expired. I was here with all the other senators on New Year's Eve just this past year when we stopped just short of going over the fiscal cliff. And here we are again. From shutdown to default, from the debt ceiling to the fiscal cliff, now back to threatened shutdown and another default crisis just weeks away. With, of course, unemployment still standing above 7%, 7.3%. From my home state, Delawareans just don't understand how we keep ending back up in this place. We have a saying in Delaware, Mr. President, that our politics are dominated by what we call the Delaware way, which means doing what's right, even when it's hard. It means coming together to make tough choices, Republicans and Democrats, listening to each other and finding principled compromise. It means being civil, playing by the rules, putting what's good for our people ahead of what's good for our politics. And it doesn't really look to me as if we've been able to muster much of that Delaware way here in Washington. Last week, the Senate considered the bipartisan Shaheen-Portman energy efficiency bill. Now, energy efficiency is about as common sense and nonpartisan as you can get. It's not about fossil fuels or renewable energy. It's about making smarter choices and reducing our energy consumption. The bill had support on both sides of the aisle. It was supported by business and labor and the environmental community, the National Association of Manufacturers, the Natural Resources Defense Council, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. A very broad range of folks and organizations all over our country endorsed that bill. I myself did work in energy efficiency when I was in the private sector at a manufacturing company, and then again when I led Delaware's largest county as county executive, and I saw the real impact that energy efficiency technologies and strategies can have on the bottom line for the private sector, the public sector, for families and businesses, and it's significant. There is so much opportunity to make a real difference for our economy, for our planet, for our communities, in energy efficiency, and that Shaheen-Portman bill gave us a chance to tap into it. It would have given millions more Americans a chance to benefit and was scored at creating 136,000 new jobs. But we blew it. Instead of debating energy policy, taking up and amending and reforming and passing that bipartisan energy efficiency bill, the Senate was again dragged down into a petty partisan political battle over the Affordable Care Act. A law that, by the way, was debated in both chambers and passed, litigated before the Supreme Court and upheld, was central to the last presidential election and was sustained. I'm not going to debate the merits of the Affordable Care Act at enormous length again. It's law. It needs to be modified. It needs to be amended so it can work more smoothly and effectively. But frankly, the law needs to be implemented. And every minute this chamber spends reliving the settled debates of the past is a minute we're ignoring the 11 million Americans out of work, the 32,000 Delawareans currently looking for a job. Each minute this chamber spends on a futile effort to strip middle-class Americans of their access to quality, affordable health care is a minute we're ignoring so many challenges. Our country's aging infrastructure, a generation of students ill-prepared for the challenges of the future, communities ripped apart by tragic gun violence. There are so many other tasks and challenges before us. Mr. President, it is insanely frustrating. Is this really what we signed up for? Is this really why all of us worked as hard as we did to get here, why we knocked on doors and campaigned all across our states for months and months? Is this really it? Is this governing If Congress spent half as much time on manufacturing policy and on manufacturing jobs as we seem to spend on manufacturing political crises, our country would be in far better shape. It can't pass laws. But man, Congress has become very good at manufacturing crises. I'm not running for president, and I don't have to impress the Tea Party, so maybe I'm missing something here. But we do have to be better than this. We just have to. There's too much at stake for our states, for our country, for our families, for the economy, for the world. This morning, the Steering and Outreach Committee had a dozen economists come in and offer their insights on what would happen if the government really does shut down just 5 days from now. If we do, then default on our national debt the next month. What would happen to the 11 million Americans still looking for jobs? What would happen to our resurgent American manufacturing industry and the 500,000 jobs that have been created there? Their answers were not encouraging. In fact, depressing, really. What was clear is that these political showdowns in this chamber exact a real cost on our economy. They hurt the ability of business owners to plan ahead. They inject incredible, unneeded uncertainty into our markets. They genuinely erode our nation's credibility and leadership on the world stage. But we keep ending up right here. One of my constituents, John Henderson from Frederica, Delaware, wrote me last week and said this, quote, "The strength of our economic recovery is on the line, and government's ability to make people's lives better is in jeopardy. Congress needs to confront our problems responsibly. But when some lawmakers dig in their heels and threaten to seriously damage America if every one of their demands isn't met, our government can't function. This isn't the time for a game of chicken. It's time to govern." Well, John, you're right. Mr. President, he's right. And this gridlock, this repeated manufactured crisis environment is just embarrassing. I'm on the Budget Committee, and under our chair, Senator Murray's leadership, we passed a budget earlier this year. Not only did the Senate budget responsibly reduce the deficit, not only did it fairly replace the sequester, but it actually invested in economic growth. We took it up here on the Senate floor and passed it here too. So not just out of committee, but out of the Senate. We stayed up all night voting on amendment after amendment for hours and hours, and in the end, it's one of the most functional things we've done this year. The Senate passes a budget, the House passes a budget, and then we come together to reconcile the differences. That's how it's been done for 200 years. And this year, finally, after years of criticism that we hadn't passed a budget, we had our chance to return to regular order, and so there we are, ready to go, budget passed, and nothing. House Republicans won't even come to the table, and a few Senate Republicans are blocking the door. They literally won't even come to the table to negotiate and resolve our budget differences and lay the groundwork for moving forward. It is insanely frustrating. Einstein once said the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. He wasn't wrong. I believe at this point the House has repealed the Affordable Care Act 42 times. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. Mr. President, I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and under the able leadership of our chair, Senator Mikulski, the committee has passed 11 appropriations bills. The House Appropriations Committee has passed 10 of theirs. We took up one of these vital appropriations bills that allows the Senate to work its will and to form and shape federal programs and federal spending. Earlier this summer, we took up one of these appropriations bills, the bill to fund the Departments of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. But Republicans on this floor were so afraid of returning to regular order, of having a responsible, reasonable, regular working process to move forward on spending in this government and our economy, it was blocked. It was blocked, prevented from even being debated. I'll ask again, is this working for anybody? Back in June of this year, the Senate passed a bipartisan farm bill. Great work was done by Senator Stabenow, chair of the Ag Committee, along with her ranking member, and senators from both sides of the aisle. The Ag Committee did significant work to reform American farm policy, like moving away from commodity subsidies and toward crop insurance. That alone would have saved taxpayers $23 billion. And we all hear that's important. We need to reduce our spending and make our programs more effective. This was a great bipartisan bill. It would have modernized our agricultural policies, strengthened programs that help farmers, ranchers, and small business owners, and created jobs. House Republicans won't negotiate with us on that bill either. They passed a bill that guts the nutrition assistance program, food stamps, cuts it by $40 billion, but won't work with us on a full farm bill. The current law also expires at the end of the month. And if we don't pass a modernizing farm bill by the end of this year, our nation's ag policies will revert to those of the 1940s. If it sounds familiar, it's because we were in the exact same position on the farm bill last year. Is this working for anybody? It is certainly not working for America. Delawareans, from whom I hear all the time, are enormously frustrated. I hope we're able to reach a deal, and I hope we're able to keep the government running. I hope we can come back next week and refocus on our economy and refocus all this energy on manufacturing and jobs, and on manufacturing jobs, not on manufacturing crises, helping American businesses grow and helping our private sector create jobs. Mr. President, Americans deserve better than this. They deserve better.